The bulky bunny that we'll make in this movie is another version of the Wascally Wabbit that was introduced in this movie. The difference is only gauge. The first movie may be used on any gauge of machine, but it will produce a small rabbit on a standard gauge machine, and that's what I demonstrated on. This one will also produce a small rabbit using different stitch and row counts. I'm using Red Heart Super Saver yarn on a bulky machine at stitch size 5. You may use this pattern on a mid-gauge machine too. I would suggest using a worsted weight yarn or a number 3 yarn. And if you choose worsted weight, I'd use Premier Eversoft or Deborah Norville Everyday Worsted. Soft yarns. My mid-gauge machines like those okay, and they're not as fond of Red Heart Super Saver. We'll start out by E-wrapping 25 needles. We'll knit 6 plain rows. I always knit the first 2 back from hold just to make sure there are no problems, and hang some claw weights or a comb as quickly as possible. So we have 6 plain rows. Change colors to something slightly different and knit 2 plain rows. Then resume knitting with the original main color for 24 additional rows. That will complete the feet and the body of the rabbit. Starting with the center stitch, that's 13 from one edge, move it to the next needle over, and then every 4th stitch moves to the next needle over, creating eyelets all along, and we move the stitches that remain together so that there are no spaces. We're basically reducing the stitch count to 75% of the original. This makes the rabbit's head a little smaller than its body. The goal is to end up with 19 stitches remaining in work. Make sure that whatever weight you're using is still situated so as to do its job, and follow with 6 more plain rows. This is the bottom part of the face. Set the carriage so that the machine will hold needles that pull all the way forward, and now we'll do a little short rowing. On the side away from the carriage, bring 1 needle into hold, knit across, a 2nd into hold, and on the side away, another into hold. This is automatic short rowing. It will avoid making holes where we short row without the necessity to wrap adjoining needles, although if you prefer to do so, you may. Every row, before knitting it, 1 more goes into hold on the side away from the carriage, and 1 more goes into hold on the same side as the carriage. Continue doing this until when the final needle goes into hold, there are only 3 stitches in work. We're done short rowing in, and now we'll start short rowing out by placing 2 needles back to work on the side opposite the carriage every row. Throughout the short rowing process, move your claw weights frequently so they keep on pulling downward on the pouch of fabric that's forming. If you fail to do that, the stitches will tend to jump off of the needles, which is a pain, but it's easily avoidable. Sometimes a finger or a thumb pulling down helps also. So we've made the rabbit's nose with the short rowing. Now we'll finish with 6 plain rows, then reduce the stitch count before binding off. I'm moving every 3rd stitch to the next needle over. You may also move every 2nd stitch if you prefer. It doesn't make a ton of difference on a project this small. Knit 1 plain row to the left, turn the stitch size all the way up to the top, knit to the right. The reason for that 1 row at a loose stitch size was to make this step easy. We're going to gather off the remaining stitches and the needle goes through them nicely if they're loose. Any yarn needle will do, but I'm using a button needle used by upholsterers because it's nice and long and makes it really easy. So there's our entire rabbit. Gather in the very top of the head and secure the gathering as though you were closing the top of a very simple hat. Then use the yarn tail to mattress stitch down the back until you come to the contrasting stripe. Up to the stripe, we're seaming so that the right side of the fabric is the knit side. At the stripe, we change over and seam so that the right side of the fabric is the purl side. Now we'll knit on the ears. Start by E-wrapping 6 needles. Flatten the head out as you see me doing to find what will be the side of the head and hang it as it falls on the 4 center needles of the 6 that were E-wrapped. Knit 14 plain rows. Then decrease 1 on each side, knit 2 rows, decrease 1 on each side, knit 2 rows, transfer 1 stitch to the other needle, snip, and pull through. We'll do the same thing for the second ear. E-wrap 6, hang the other side of the head. By the way, the nose should be pointing towards you in view. 14 plain rows, decrease, 2, decrease, 2, transfer to 1 needle, and pull the yarn tail through. This completes our rabbit shape, and we have some finishing to do. First, the tails at the top of the ears. Thread each one into a yarn needle and work that tail down through the very edge of the ear. At the bottom of the ear, stitch the bottom of the ear securely to the remaining fabric, bury the yarn tail, and snip it off. Do that for both ears. The rabbit's facial features may be beads or buttons or fabric paint or drawing with permanent markers. For baby animals and humans, choking is a hazard, so I would not recommend beads and buttons. Stick with markers for them. But I'm using beads for the eyes and nose. If using them, it's easiest to sew them on now before the remaining finishing. When that's done, stuff the rabbit's head with fiberfill. Once the head is stuffed, we can put the ribbon around the neck. Again, if a choking hazard is likely, you can secure the yarn by stitching it through the back of the neck and make it less likely to come out. I'm using multiple strands of a thinner coordinating yarn here. Eventually, I did finish this particular rabbit differently, but this is an alternative you can consider. Now fill the remainder of the rabbit, but not the feet, with fiberfill. This is why we chose a firm fabric, so that fiberfill won't tend to bleed out. But if you do suffer from grin through, you can always put a knee-high stocking inside of the rabbit to help contain the stuffing. The cast-on edge up to the slightly different stripe, we're going to let it roll upwards. So we'll flatten it, stitch across it using the yarn tails that are present. Any extra yarn tails may, of course, be stuffed right inside the rabbit along with the stuffing. Stitch to and fro across the stripe, and it will roll outwards. We actually want that. That's going to create the feet. So once you've finished back stitching from the center out, back to the center, out to the other edge, back to the center, stuffing in all the yarn tails, wrap the yarn across at the center point all the way around the dual fabric rolls a couple of times. This will delineate the feet. You may want to tack the rolled fabric upwards so it stays in its rolled position to make the feet their best looking that they can be. Weave in the ends by pushing each one all the way into the rabbit, making a big stitch, pulling the yarn up slightly, trimming it off flush with the fabric, and they'll never be seen again. And there's the bulky version of the Wascally Wabbit. For an experienced knitter, this project takes less than an hour. Beginners will, of course, take a little longer, but they can manage it. Those who would really like a written copy of the pattern to refer to will be happy to know it will be coming out spring of 2024 in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views.